13 Russians have been indicted for meddling in the US elections. Let's look at this realistically and take a historical perspective at who's meddling in elections. Coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello everybody and welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. First of all, I want to thank everybody for subscribing. We have just gone through the roof as far as subscribers goes, and watch out, here it comes. Look out, and we gotta wait for that thing to do its thing, and then, okay. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And also I want to tell you that because of things like this, I'm running for senator from Washington State. So if you live in Washington State or you know somebody in Washington State, I need you to get out on August 7th for the primaries, or not for the primaries, for the preliminary elections, and I need you to get out on November 6th and vote for me for the 1st Congressional District in Washington State that covers all the way from Canada, Bellingham, all the way down to basically I-90. So if you are sick and tired of what's going on and jokes like this on you, go ahead and tell your friends or go out and vote for me, register to vote for me, get involved, and let's change the country now. We don't have time to wait. So please vote for me in November. I know that we can really send a message to Washington that we're sick of it and we're really going to change and we want our country back. 13 people from Russia have been indicted for meddling in the 2016 election. But before we go too much farther in it, let's just first understand what is an indictment. Now, the Webster Dictionary says an indictment is this. And while you're reading that, I'm going to tell you the layman's term for an indictment. An indictment is basically the government or the courts saying, I am accusing you of doing something. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if you're accused of a crime, then you need to come and defend yourself. So what are these people accused of? Are they accused of a crime? No, they're not accused of doing anything wrong. The Department of Justice has just handed down 7, basically they're calling these people names, and how does this really affect them? Well, there's going to be 13 people from Russia who can no longer or travel to the United States. Maybe they're going to be restricted, they're going to be put on some list or whatever. And this is what was done. This has been going on since 2014. This is a result of the Trump fiasco, this so-called Russian collusion. And it still continues to keep going on, even though it has been said yesterday, there is nothing to this. But we're going to explain why there actually is something to this and why this continues to drag on. Okay. The first thing that you need to be very concerned about is that this indictment was handed down by the Department of Justice. Now, this is the Department of Justice who are accusing these people of meddling by taking out perfectly legal ads on social media. And according to the reports, the ads they took out were a very small portion of the traffic that went around about the 2016 election, had very minimal impact on the election. And other than being for Trump, if it would have been for Hillary Clinton, you wouldn't have any of this right now. But what we need to understand about this is that there was no crime involved. This has been going on since 2014, before, as Donald Trump says, he even got involved in the election. Okay, so you need to understand, first and foremost, no crime has been committed. 13 indictments. How many millions of dollars have been spent on an investigation of something that's been going on since 2014? No crime has been committed, yet 13 indictments have been handed down. Why? Well, it's very simple. The Democrats, the DNC, and you need to understand this. They need to keep the narrative going. As long as they can keep Russia in the headlines and Trump in the headlines, they are gambling that stupid Joe Sixpack and idiot soccer moms out there are going to say, okay, Trump, Russia. Trump, Russia. And as you watch the news broadcasts, it will always be the same thing. Russia story, Trump. Russia story, Trump. So that when you go talk to the mindless guy on the street or woman on the street, they're going to say, oh, there was something about Trump and Russia. So why would they want to keep this narrative going? Because they have nothing. The Democrats are not doing their job. And what they're trying to do now is just keep people who are very simple, who are uneducated, who don't understand anything, upset and associating Trump with some kind of an evil force, because the fact is that they were the ones that spent $12 million on a phony dossier that went through the Department of Justice, was handled by John McCain, was reported to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton, it was her campaign. She took money from Bernie Sanders. She knew there were $12 million going to try to sandbag Trump. So that is why this keeps going. And also, if you want to look at the influence of the globalists, the banks, and the Rothschilds, then I have a video about that if you want to just click on this link up here sometime. So now that we understand that an indictment is an accusation, that it actually means nothing to these Russians, because except they probably can't come to the US now because they didn't commit any crime. So now that we have all of that out of the way, let's be realistic. Let's take a little look at history and let's see who really is involved in manipulating elections. Now, I'm no big fan of Vladimir Putin. Let's be honest, this guy just took $250 million or $1 million from his opposition and locked his opposition up in jail. So these are things that are more associated with the Democratic National Committee than they are with the Trump campaign. I'm quoting an article in the Los Angeles Times by Nina Agrawal. In that article, which I'm going to put the link in the description, the United States has been involved in manipulating elections 81 times. Now, this does not count overthrowing governments, assassinations, or regime change, as we saw in the case of Saddam Hussein and Omar Gaddafi and the attempt on Assad in Syria. Let's just recap what we've gone over here. The Justice Department has handed down a 13-count indictment in spite of the fact that they have determined there has been no Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. They still have handed down a 13-count indictment against Russian citizens. The indictment doesn't mean anything other than that maybe these Russians cannot travel here anymore. The reason that this narrative keeps being perpetuated is for the simple purpose of having it on the news so that simple, dumbed-down Americans will see Trump in a story, Russia in a story, Russia in a story, Trump in a story. So eventually the media will just be able to manipulate these two together. And how do I know this? Because yesterday I was watching CBS, which I never do, but I just turn it on for a few minutes, and they're talking about this story, and they said, well, there's nothing to this Russian collusion campaign at all. And what was the anchor's response? But it's not over yet, is it? So that's the point of all this. They want to continue this narrative, even though there's nothing to it, just so that they can associate Russia, Trump, and push that onto a dumbed down American population. So the next thing is the fact of the matter is the United States and the intelligence community, the Department of Justice, Clinton, Obama paid $12 million for a phony dossier in order to manipulate the United States election. At the same time, Putin pretty much did the same thing by locking his opposition up and seizing all of his campaign funds. I'm sure that's exactly what they had in store for Donald Trump. Okay, so the last thing that, or not the last thing, but the next thing is that the United States has manipulated 81 elections. This does not count regime change, assassinations, electioneering, polling, help, and things like that. So 81 elections have been manipulated by the United States. And we have handed out 13 counts and 13 indictments against private citizens from Russia that had absolutely or pretty much minimal effect on any election here. Okay, so the last thing that we need to talk about, and the most serious thing, is that this is a Department of Justice that brought us, this is the FBI, so they brought us, if we can't remember, Waco. Remember they went in and burned those people out? They didn't seem to connect the dots on September 11th or in the 1999 World Trade Center bombing. How did that happen? Didn't seem to connect the dots there. They have never connected the dots. All these terrorists, attacks that have been carried out, they just never seem to connect the dots. And in the last incident in the school shooting, when there's an immediate call to take away our guns instead of an immediate call to disband the FBI, which is the real solution to this problem. So I want you to know, as Deceptions of the Ages viewers, that this is very dangerous times, and we need to get these senile, delusional Democrats out of our government, because they're going to cause a lot of problems. And if we keep picking on governments and countries for doing the same things that we're doing, eventually they're going to get really upset about that, and the consequences for us could be catastrophic. So that's your news for today. This is Deceptions of the Ages News. We'll see you next time. If you like this channel, if you like getting historically based videos and interpretations of the news that are actually accurate and not lies, then go ahead and consider a Patreon subscription. You can become a producer of this show, an assistant producer, or just one of the many nameless minions. So all of these and the prices are listed at patreon.com/hindsight. Okay, let's get down to business.